never have children, even though it's said I'd be a great dad. And then that makes me wonder, how is a man supposed to be a man? I'm looking into my personal life right now, even though I'm a best-selling author and people think it's all good on the outside. The reality is, well, I'm going to open out now and pull the curtain back. And with that, I'm looking at research as well. And there's an alarming thing to be said about us men in middle age who do not have children. I'm getting older. That's the truth of it all. And although I've kind of known that for a while, I mean, we all know it, don't we? We all know it as soon as we get to, say, 30 years of age. And but the thing about it is, what's been on my mind, what is on my mind now actually, is I'll never be a father. I'll never be a father biologically to a child. I'll never actually be a father. Which means at my age, like mid-40s, right now it's okay. But if I look back, say 20 years, that was mid-20s. That was cool. But because I can look back 20 years, I can also look forward 20 years in a certain way. And if I look back 20 years and I start thinking about what would I think about, what would I feel, what would I be doing in 20 years' time? And I look at my present and then project myself to looking forward 20 years. The reality is, unless something is going on really well right now, and let's face it, there's 9 months of pregnancy going on. Well, unless that's happening, well, then in 20 years' time, I'm not going to have a 20-year-old child. So, how does that make me feel? Well, right now, it's very realistic to know that obviously 20 years is going to pass. And then I start thinking about how I'll feel in 20 years' time. Having gone through, say, 40, 65 years. Like, that's a pension age. And thinking to myself, how will I actually feel with regard to, say, my peers? Because all my friends, all my people my age, men and women, will have had children. Not only children, but many will have 40-year-old children. Many will actually have certainly 30-year-old, 35-year-old children. Adults, people that basically I'm friends with right now, age group wise. People that I can get along with. And that's kind of scary when I think about that. I mean, there's this whole thing about middle age. How old is middle age? Well, middle age is 40 plus, a lot of the research. But at the same time, it's a big bracket. If we look at, say, teenage years, adolescence, it's only a handful of years. Middle age is a lot more than that, 4 or 5 times that. So once you're a little bit established in life, a little bit more mature, a little bit kind of, well, if you're into certain things, you're an adult, man, woman, whatever, it doesn't matter. And you can kind of laugh and giggle at the ones that are in the 20s that are just kind of out of adolescence as such, neurologically in adolescence in some ways too. We'll get to that another time. But when I think then of having friends right now, that age, say in their 30s and even 40, and then think of potentially not having, say, a child, that's kind of scary. Because in 20 years' time, I will be that guy. I will be the guy that doesn't have a child. And I think of guys I know that age, and I do know guys that age now, in their mid-60s, friends of mine, because I have friends of all age groups, which is, I think, good. But in thinking that way, wow, I think to myself, it's a bit crazy. Because I see their lifestyle now and my lifestyle, and like we can hang for quite a while. We can chat, we can go places, we can just basically have a laugh and have many, many things in common. And that's all good. But I think the problem with that is, as well, is that, and this is no disrespect to any of my friends listening or watching, but it's what do you have? What do you have at the end of it all? I'm not saying you're in or anything like that, but if you're in your mid-60s, like, what do you have? What's the real legacy? That's the word that came to mind recently when I started thinking about this. And what is the best legacy a person can have? I think it's a lot of things, but I'm thinking about psychology, and I'm thinking about ego and the id. Again, not getting too deep on that, but I think there is the human part, of course, and I'm the human right now on this walk, and it's natural to want that. Need it? Maybe not. Certainly if you're 65, 70 and you look back, you'd probably think, God, I need it now. But maybe not at this age. We don't feel like you need the child. So for me, it's projecting it into the future, the 20, 30 years time. Wouldn't it be great to have a good adult around me that's capable, that loves me, that's younger, that's a version of me, that has my genetics? Yeah, it's a fair trade. And it's a good legacy. But then I do think of that word legacy again, and I think of an old friend of mine. You can check him out. He's a great guy. And Tony is his name. He has walked around the world. Imagine that. He's a crazy guy. But he's done that. And we had this discussion ourselves before about this with regard to legacy. And I remember a few years ago, it was well before the pandemic, in fact. And it's natural. I mean, there's a guy who's doing wonderful things and gone around the world and helped so many people in doing so. myworldwalk.com. And after it all, after all those many, many thousands of miles, many, many countries, continents, wow, it's just incredible. Imagine how many strides. I'm not even going to calculate it. But after all of that, he was wondering, legacy, what do I do? You know, this is a guy at 60 years of age or so at the time. And now, as I project myself forward to those 15, 20, 30 years time, please God, if I'm alive, will I have any human legacy? And I think one of the best, if not the best, is to have a child. But then, right to this point, my fear, that itty bitty fear that's there, is it honestly asking myself of regrets of the past, regrets of situations, regrets of dates, regrets of relationships that were had or not had? Maybe, but I don't have them right now. But will that eat into the fear in the future? Possibly. Maybe I'll have more clarity in the future with regard to the events, the people, places, the happenings, what was said, what was not said, relationships, lack of relationships, being with the right people, not being with the right people. Time will tell if I'm around for it. And being around for it is what you want a child for, isn't it? To have those experiences, to have that life, to be able to kind of work towards and keep yourself motivated in life, to work towards this. I mean, I have friends, super entrepreneurs that are decades older than me. And I remember a conversation between three of us one time. And we were talking about age, and these two guys were being introduced and chatting away about their ages, and they were older than me. They were, similar enough in age and had children and that. And they were talking about how much work they had left, how they relished that. That they had decades and more time to work at things. And that's pretty cool. Because if you're doing good things and great things like these guys were doing, well, that means can continue. You can grow things. But growth then is a thing that, when we speak about children, you want to be around for. Don't get me wrong, I have nieces and nephews and I love them to bits, as they say. I couldn't be happier with them. Couldn't be more proud of them. But it's like everything, isn't it? You want something your own. Something that you have, that you're the only father or mother, or parent, or the person that they rely on, the person that they come to. And energy comes into it as well. Energy of my age group. Energy of projecting myself into the future, 20, 30 years in time. Will I have the energy to be an older father? Will I have the energy to be an older parent if I was given the opportunity in the future? I don't know is the answer, because I can't predict the future that well. Personally, if I could, well, I wouldn't be doing this video. So there's like one question, one fear, one worry in this regard, like multiplies. And it opens up a whole host of questions, a whole can of worms, maybe. And then I think about the past, and again, opportunities perhaps. And I can remember being in the cab, taxi. And in the taxi, I was after a night out. And I had a good night, don't get me wrong, in some ways. It was fun. I was around my friends and it was good music. And I was mentally in a good place, emotionally and so on. But it was also tough insofar as frustration, because I had no girlfriend and I was traveling a little, not too far a journey. I was actually only a couple of miles. And I'd be home in about 10 minutes, that's all really. And got chatting with the cab driver. He was a nice guy, really nice guy actually. Of course, he was that age that I'm projecting myself forward into, 60s. And we got chatting and had the usual, hey, how's it going? What's your night like? Where did you go? What the crowd's like? Any trouble? That kind of stuff. And he's relaying it back to me with regard to what's on the street and passengers that he was serving and so on. And I remember distinctly where I was actually, not just the conversation, but I remember like where we stopped on the road, or where it kind of, memory started for me on the road. We're at the traffic lights, toward red light. And I tell you, not red light district though, but it was a red light insofar as I got frustrated. And when I say I got frustrated, I couldn't get my head around the fact that there was no women present that particular night. And at that time, it wasn't just one woman I was after or anything like that. It was more to do with, there was a lack of nice girls present around. And so it was frustrating. And it wasn't just that night. That particular night was just one particular, say, example and pinnacle of what was going on with regard to social life at the time. It wasn't great. It wasn't good at all, actually. And so what it said to me was, well, we've got to figure this out. Earlier on, I mentioned how men without children can struggle in being a man. And this is from the author and researcher Hadley. They have got it down because they've looked at the fact that this is a huge problem. It's a growing problem. They've seen that there's declining fertility rates all around an increasingly aging population, which gives a serious knock-on effects, not just now, but down the line, because obviously it takes a few years for the child to be born, and for the spending and the economic and the social implications that will occur because of that. But these implications, these knock-on effects, are not just for you, for me, the childless father, but also for institutions alike. Childless men, the reality is, are mostly excluded from aging, social science, and reproduction scholarship. And so it's with this in mind that they started doing all this research. Now, they looked at, within this book, the disenfranchised population that is these childless men and the lived experience. So they actually spoke to men. And one such guy, and his feedback is very interesting. And his name is Edward. Now, within the book, he explained how he really doesn't have any regret, even though he's never had children, never had grandchildren. He's an uncle and granduncle to his great nieces and nephews, and he has a good rapport with them. And with that, he reckons that he links in well with that particular generation by essentially being a friend in that way. Now, Edward was kind of like me. He was the youngest of 4 children himself, and he was the one without children and grandchildren. But he reckoned he had that close-knit relationship with his nieces, nephews, and grandnieces and nephews. Still, it gets me thinking about my own case. I'm very similar to Edward in that way because I'm the youngest of 4 children. So it was just that there was no particular, say, women in general around, not just that night, but the previous few nights that I'd been out. And there was a bit of a raw, habitual culture about it at the time where it just wasn't a good period. It wasn't a good season to go out and try and enjoy yourself, try and meet girls and chat to them. This is back in my 20s, by the way, 20 odd years ago. But I remember being so frustrated because of this, because I was like, how can I move forward? How can I get a girlfriend? How can I do anything like that progressively? I'm here, I'm getting myself out there, I'm dressing up, I'm being a good boy, I'm getting out, and nothing's happening. Where are the women? Why aren't they coming to the party? So I was chatting away with the cab driver about this, and he said to me, what age are you? And I said to him, 27, 28. And he said, oh my God, gosh, when I was your age. And I said, why? What happened when you were my age? And he said, well, when I was your age, I was well on the way to having not just a wife, but children. In fact, he said I was getting married. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. So over the next few minutes, and as I said, it was only like a 10-minute conversation. And when the frustration came to me, it was halfway already through the actual journey. And so I said to him, like, why at 27, like 27, 28, why were you like on the way to get married? You must have been madly in love. And he said, well, no, it was just that I was, wanted to be a father. I remember then thinking, okay, so you're a father then? Oh, yes, I am. He said, I have a son and a daughter. Now, he may have had more daughters and sons, that is. I don't know, but it's a while since the memory. But I know he had a son and a daughter, and he was very pleased with them, very happy with them. And what he said to me was that he was so mad, like so anxious to get married at that time, that he basically got married to a girl of his age group in the locality. And so I said to him, that's great, you got married, and she must be the love of your life, she must be this wonderful woman. No, well, sure, look, he said, they're grown up now, herself and himself, son and daughter. And, well, to tell you the truth, I'm taxiing, doing the cab driving a few years now, and I usually don't do nights, but I'm actually doing it tonight because it's tricky enough to stay at home with the wife, he said. And I said to myself, ooh, the wife. So is this the same woman, the mother of your children? Oh, it is, he said. And then at this stage, we stopped the car, we pulled in, and he continued to talk. I'd give him cash, paid for the journey. I was ready to go. I was okay to hang about. So he told me that a little bit more, that when he was younger, early 20s, there was this girl that just knocked his heart out of his chest, or bumped his heart out of his chest, or just rocked his world. And he wanted to be with her. He was thinking, this is the girl of my dreams. And he tried in a certain way and it didn't work. And then 27, 28 came and suddenly he was like, well, I need to be a father, right? I need to have a child. So there was another girl and she was okay. And so he decided to court her or to go out with her at the time, which he did. And that was fine. And guess what happened? They had babies, girl and a boy, maybe more. And with that, they also had marriage. 20 years passed, projecting his story forward now. And, well, the lovely daughter and son got married, got out of the house, got on with their lives, got big, and he was bored. He was in a marriage where, although the wife is okay, they were just living in the same house. And so now he had to go cab driving in the evenings. Yes, indeed. Not just for money, but to get out of the house, to get away from herself, he said. So I was like, at this stage, I'm sitting down, trying to go to bed late at night. But I was like intrigued. And I said to him, well, if that's the case, that's tricky, that's awkward, that's tough. But I mean, you're 65 or whatever. So he was like a clear 40 odd years older than me at that time. And I said to him, would you not have a regret now? Is that like a regret of yours to get married and have those children, and now that you're with the wife that you have to get out of the house at 65 odd late at night to drive a cab that you don't really need the money to drive at night, but it's just trying to get out of the house? And he said to me, well, I don't regret the children because I always wanted to have children. Okay, grand. But then there's one woman, he said. I said, is that the woman from years ago, 40 years ago? And he said, yeah. Okay. How is she? Well, she got married. And I said, great, good. So she's good. I don't really know. He said, well, I didn't know until recently. And I said, how do you mean? And he said, well, that's another reason why I'm trying to get out at night. I said, what do you mean? Well, he said she got married. Now, I don't remember if she had children. Probably told me, but it doesn't really matter anyway. But he said she's recently separated. Well, fairly recently separated in the context of 30, 40 years. And she had moved back into the locality of where he was. I think he was from that area as well. And she was knocking about, hanging around kind of thing. So I said to him, how does it make you feel? Oh, he said, tempted. Tempted. Why, do you still fancy her? Yeah, I do. I said, okay. So you've got this thing going on with marriage, where it's kind of stagnant. Let's face it, it's lost its energy, its perk. And yet you feel perky towards somebody else from a long time ago. And that was the time it was time to go then. And that's the end of the memory of that story, I have to say. But I guess there's a trade-off there in that story, and that's probably how it stuck with me with regard to meeting the right person, going about things the right way, and having a child or children, family, nuclear family. And then, super, you get what you want. You're all cozy, cuddling up on the sofa. And isn't that great? Sure is. But for the sake of that man, it wasn't that great. Because at the end of it all, he had the lovely children. They grew up. They went and did their independent lives. And now he was stuck. He was back to square one in lots of ways. If we put them all under love, I'd love to have children. I'd love to be in love. I'd love to have the perfect relationships with children, perfect relationship with wife, husband, whatever. He was now stuck. 40 years later, after he made the big, perhaps maybe rash decision, 27, 40 odd years later, is he regretting it? Yes, he was. So there's a lot, I think, in that story, and it always clung to my brain. And it's only one man's story. And again, in research we have case studies, and that's a case study for sure. If I could ever get that cab driver's number of the past, it would be interesting now. I wonder how it went. But when I think of it all, legacy and having children, and even one child, I do believe it's growth. I think if you think enough about it, and if you surmise enough, if you talk to good people about it, if you feel the need for professional advice, that's okay too. It's probably not a thing that men of my age ever do, is take professional advice about that. But like anything, if it's a fear, well, we have to face it. And in facing it, we have to own up to the fact that the fear will pull us back in some way, and it could create regret. And for me, I'll be honest right now, I'm in the process of figuring out where all that lies for myself. And only the future will tell, of course. And who knows? But there's one thing for certain. I don't want that fear to create a regret. Because going back to that story about the cab driver, taxi driver, I think for them, it was an alarming fear. It was almost like they needed to get things off their chest. I just happened to be there at that time. And created a huge memory for me. And a watershed moment. Such was the fear in him that had been realized effectively. So I don't want to walk down that road. Not in that way anyway, certainly. Everybody to their own. It won't be happening to me now anyway, because I'm 20 years older than he was at the stage of when he wanted to have that child. So it's a fear, but like all fears, I think we have to be very careful where we go with them.
Thanks for watching. Please like this video. If you subscribe, comment to say that you have, and we'll look after you.